Today I had lots of stories going on in my mind. And then later on in the day, those stories seemed somewhat ridiculous because you can transcend your stories even in a day. It still can be interesting to look at and think about your stories. Maybe there's something useful in them. So I was thinking about buying an apartment. Because at work, of course, the subject came up about how I felt like I was behind in life because I hadn't done that yet. I hadn't bought something. And of course, I got out the calculator and started calculating. The recommended amount is 28% of your gross pay for the mortgage, taxes, and insurance. And calculating how much of a mortgage I could afford and thinking like that's not enough to even buy something. And then what if I have a renter? Oh, and then what if I just have a relationship? Oh, wow. Yeah, looking back at the stories, it seems kind of ridiculous now, but this is where I was at this morning. Okay, so if I had a partner, then we could easily form like a 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom together, assuming they made a similar amount to what I did. I was like, oh, but then I would also feel pressured to do like the cooking and cleaning and have this extra burden, and then might feel pressured to have physical intimacy as well. And then I might start to feel resentful or used or cheap. And then I thought, otherwise, living alone, I feel blessed, I feel relaxed, and I feel peace. Such a dilemma. Not the bugs, they're fine. Just the thoughts. And then what if I feel like I'm stepping into the role of his mother and feeling like I have to subsidize him and feeling resentful about it? And I was thinking that, oh, if you're kind of paying for a guy and he's not providing for you, and like, oh, I'm not wealthy enough for that. And it changes the nature of the dynamic. And then, of course, all these thoughts about getting married and like, oh, well, if you get married and you have a provider who's providing for you, then that would mean I don't have to worry about money. Because I spend a lot of time worrying about money. And I think about it like as me stepping into my masculine aspect, which is about competition, about managing money, which I like managing money. That's not an issue for me. But that stress of competition, of course, the career, the job, getting the right career track and the right skills, maybe starting a side business or doing whatever you need to do. And I was like having this fear about, maybe having this delusion about, okay, I'm getting married to this guy and then it's going to be taken care of. And then what if we get divorced and then I end up not having enough money and then I have to worry all over again about this and being like, oh, I just want to relax. Like either like I am still taking care of managing my finances and having this like masculine competitive side, or I can relax and let go of that completely. And I thought about this in terms of the masculine being really good at that competitive nature, having that structure, having that focus and determination, and being really self-motivated and driven to create that money and create that work that needs to be done to create that money, and so that you can feel taken care of, whether that's by you or by someone else. And then the feminine aspect, being able to relax and just enjoy it, not having to worry about it. And me looking back and thinking about how in my 20s, I was really focused on that competitive side and I really developed that masculine side. And now in my 30s, I'm like, I've had enough of the stress and I just want to relax. And it's not that I haven't met, even through dating apps, guys who could take care of that aspect for me, but it didn't feel aligned with me and I wasn't happy with that. And so then I stepped into, well, I'm going to take care of it myself. And I know there's a criticism of women who are too motivated and driven and have this really intense masculine energy, and it doesn't polarize men properly, who want this like submissive woman who's really has this sweet demeanor, who's not stressed. Yeah, so I'm thinking about a relationship and I'm thinking about, I'm not sacrificing what I need to do for my career or my personal development in order for me to create the kind of financial abundance that I want in my life. I'm not sacrificing it for someone who can't provide that for me. And I feel such a fear about being stuck in a situation, for example, marriage, where I'm not happy, mostly because seeing my parents and them, it being not a healthy thing and also very financially abusive, which of course there are lots of people who do have really healthy relationships, and not necessarily, it doesn't necessarily mean that I'm going to be ending up in that situation, but there's that fear, so much so that I'm like, oh, even if I got into a marriage or that kind of committed relationship, I couldn't see myself really relaxing fully into my feminine energy unless I felt that that was completely taken care of, even if we didn't stay together. Which, hearing that is probably, oh, that's a little bit unrealistic. So I'm like, well, maybe I just don't want a relationship at all then. And I think the interesting part here is a realization that I had. So a lot of this that happened up to this point, there are all these thoughts and these stories. And a lot of it's based in my fear about not being okay in a relationship, being really hurt, being really disadvantaged, being emotionally and financially at risk, losing everything that I've worked so hard to build within myself, the financial stability that I have now and can maintain, the emotional and mental stability. But is that operating from a place of abundance? No. Oh, I know. I know it's operating from a place of fear, and that's okay, because I can feel both. I can feel that limited part of myself, but also the part of myself that wants to expand and grow. But that brings me to my realization of really wanting someone who can't provide to try and provide for me. And the struggle with that. Because yes, I met these men who could provide financially, and it wasn't enough for me. I wanted more. I think I really wanted more of not just financial provision, because if I look at myself, I can do that for myself. So if we're honest here, I don't really need someone to just provide money for me, because I can do that for myself. If I really think closely about it, what I really want is not just the financial, but the mental and emotional and spiritual, the intellectually engaging conversation and ideas. That's really exciting when you talk to someone who's really, really neat ideas and they expand and challenge you. That's really fun. And the emotional connection, like when you can talk to them and you can feel held and you can feel that space where they can just be in that space with you. You can step outside of their mind and just connect with you, really pay attention. It's really beautiful when you have that. And where you have space and room to grow spiritually, where you're not feeling this intense disconnect with the other person. And looking back, I could feel some of that with the men that I was talking to. Yeah, and I see that frustration that I felt trying to have this expectation of men to provide something for me, which I can provide better for myself. And this was the realization that was really helpful for me. It's almost like these romance movies, not even romance movies anymore, like the American style, which are really like sex and drugs, but I enjoyed more of the Korean, Chinese dramas. And there's this fantasy really of this guy like chasing you and yeah, stepping into this really masculine role. And me expecting that of guys who can't do it. They're not capable of it. And then of course me feeling frustrated. And I didn't, up until today, I didn't fully realize how I was doing this. And it seems so simple to talk about it the way I'm talking about it now. It's so obvious, right? But the awareness of how this was affecting me wasn't obvious. Yeah, and if you release that expectation, then you have choices. Well, what do I do about this? Because as long as you have this expectation, then it's going to cause you stress. Yeah, so I'm going to talk about this a little more and grow it into a bit of a framework. And this is loosely based off the framework that Mina Irfan talks about on her channel, The Universe Guru. She has different labels for it. And I'm just going to use a paraphrase of my own wording and apply my own understanding to what she's saying. I'm not going to exactly get what she said right. So she breaks it down into 4 stages. And we can see people in these different stages in our society. And I don't like the idea of levels as if one is better than the other. It's just we can recognize these aspects within ourselves and with others and recognize the challenges that are coming up and the themes that are coming up. We can't really say one's better than the other because it's just what it is. It's just where we're at and we're learning different lessons from it. So I would say like this first stage would be a victim mindset. And you can see how some people avoid fixing their problems. And they even create more problems. Oh, they're kind of children in an adult body. And I was thinking of terms of dating because, and I'm going to talk about this extreme case, right? Of someone looking for a parent figure rather than a partner. Someone has a big ego and they're very sensitive. They needs to be constantly fed. Having trouble achieving anything on their own. And they need a lot of help and they're very dependent. And they can be very selfish, very concerned with their own needs only. And then going up, and I see a lot of people who get a university education and get a job, do trades, and they get a good stable job and career, starting a business and learning the discipline that comes along with this. So a lot of this is achievement, discipline, structure. This can be developed through sports as well, and various different disciplines. So it's the ability to see it through to the end. For example, with music, being able to practice every day and do that consistently. And I see this as very masculine, developing that structure, developing that focus and that discipline. It's really important to be able to develop this in order to be able to get results in your life. And this feels also very much related to survival, to take care of yourself, to take care of your needs. You need to learn how to do this. And it takes you from being dependent to being independent. So you develop the ability to manage your money, to create results. And so when I talk about like me learning how to do this, really developing this in my 20s, that's really what I mean there. And of course, I went to school and I had this mindset before of wanting to be provided for. I would like go back into this. And this is a whole nother topic of where I wanted to be like the perfect woman for this kind of provider person, because I didn't want to really provide for myself. And so that's like that submissive kind of feminine person. But that wasn't what was the best thing for my own growth. And as I moved forward, I realized, you know what, I can do this. And I think that was really healthy for me. Okay, and so then the next stage, I would say, is more of a feminine aspect. So it's releasing that control. So when I talked about surrender in a video, I think yesterday, and this is really about where it's about flourishing. You could call it a stage where you're manifesting, you're going with the flow, developing intuition, developing a feminine side. Yeah, learning to surrender to the divine. And if people talk about like, oh, once you get the flow of money, it just keeps flowing, like there's this ease, you're really kind of figuring it out. Okay, I got the ball rolling through learning how to take accountability for my life, how to achieve, but then I wanted more results, I wanted bigger. How do I get stuff that's beyond myself, beyond what I can control? So this is really interesting. So it's stepping from survival, and I think a lot of it's what I'm moving into now. And then I would say the fourth stage is accessing your divine nature. You've really taken care of all the stuff in your physical world, and you're really just upping your experience of life and your spiritual connection and exploring what's possible there. So different levels and states of consciousness. And I would say because you've really mastered your physical life, you're exploring the different avenues of yourself. And I was thinking about how you can see this play out in relationships. So you can have a marriage where someone is really in the victim mindset. And if you have another person in the victim mindset with them, it's chaos and it's not fun. And we can see a lot of this in dating, especially on dating apps. And they say, oh, it's not. Why is dating so bad? Well, you've got a lot of people who have this childlike victim mindset, and they don't, of course, it's not going to work out. You create some drama, move on to the next person, create some more drama. And then you can have someone with the victim mindset paired with someone with that achievement ability. So they've created some success for themselves in their life. And that can be a struggle too. And maybe the person who has that achievement, who has created that relative success for themselves in their life, might have a power dynamic, which may or may not be healthy, may not be balanced well. But you can see how this is not ultimately fulfilling. And you can see how, as a result of affirmative action, how women being able to access more financial independence have really developed this masculine aspect of themselves. And there's this complaint about how they're too masculine. But once you get up to the next level, learning to surrender the feminine aspect, and I see that as, if you look in a man and you see that he's developed that success, but then he's tuning into his own feminine nature, and he's able to be really present with his emotions and engage in this really beautiful way, which is really a delight to be around. I would say my landlord is very much like this. Very successful in his business and very beautiful personality, very caring, very considerate, very enjoyable to be around, very thoughtful. And of course, there might be a bit of conflict if this kind of person is paired with someone who's in the achievement mode and they can't relax and surrender. But this can still be a very healthy dynamic. When you have two people both in their achievement, then they're both really in their masculine and no one's going to surrender, and maybe there's less polarity there. And so the polarity between the feminine and masculine creates that magic chemistry. And if we look at the reality of the world that we live in, especially the economic reality, it's natural to see that there's a lot of men who want to step into this provider role, but they can't because it's so difficult and so challenging. There's this compromise where they will partner with a woman who is very high in her achieving masculine side, and then they will have to balance it out, which not everyone has success with, because you can bring the different aspects. Once you've developed the different aspects, the different achievement and surrender aspects, being that in charge and in control, and then in that surrender state, you can bring them out at different times and you can balance them better. If you're really stuck in just one thing, then that's hard. And of course, with marriage, we have this mindset that, it's divinely ordained by God. Well, the divine, where you access your divine nature, that's like at the fourth stage. You put two people together who are still in their victim mindset. I'm sorry, but that's not divine. And I've thought that that's why it's important not to demonize divorce, because we're entering into a new level of awareness. We're realizing what paradigms just didn't work. So there's lots of people in situations which are not very nice. And there has to be a certain amount of allowance and acceptance for that, because then they have to deal with and work through that. They don't need the extra shame piled on top of that. Back to me realizing that I was expecting these men in my life to really be more developed in their masculine and feminine aspects than they were. Because if you think about it, if you try and push someone to develop to where they're not ready to, you're trying to help them, and sure, maybe they'll develop, but then maybe you'll still make them feel uncomfortable, and they'll go find someone who will be more impressed by their development that they've had. And they'll leave you. And you were expecting them to be loyal to you because you poured so much into them. And maybe it's time to shift that into, I want to be with this person in the moment, And I realize that whatever, how much ever I will help them and help them to grow, they might take that and leave me and go to someone else who is more impressed by it. Because if someone has that level of development that is just that much little bit further than you, then you can really appreciate it. And if someone feels like they just can't get there, they're going to be frustrated and just give up. And I realized, yeah, I've had this expectation instead of just acknowledging that this person isn't there, and me trying to expect them to be there it's like me sabotaging myself. Yeah, I was crying about how I wanted to be with this person, and then when I really thought through this process, I was like, well, I've really developed myself a lot more than they have in terms of my masculine and feminine aspects, and I'm expecting them to catch up and surpass me. Well, then I stopped crying because I realized if I look at it realistically, that I would be the leader in that relationship. And do I really want that? Do I really want to build them up? And then maybe at the end of them still feeling challenged by me and not wanting to continue to rise up and develop themselves. Would I be okay with them just leaving? And I thought, well, maybe I'd rather just focus on myself and focus on developing what I want and provide for myself the financial, the emotional support that I want, the internal connection with myself that I want. If I'm better at providing that for myself, it makes more sense to provide that for myself than to try and get someone else to do it for me, which is so strange and so weird, but so normal. Instead of trying to get someone to be someone they aren't, I can just focus on me being who I realistically want them to be in my mind, but I wasn't being honest with myself about it. And then if I just want to spend time with someone, I can just spend time with them in whatever capacity I desire. What I truly desire, not what I'm trying to get out of someone. For example, I'm attracted to someone, but they're not in a position in their life where they can take that chair. They can take charge, they can be that masculine provider, and me realizing that because they can't fulfill that role, they're not going to pursue me. And it doesn't have anything to do with me not being good enough, which is what I've been believing for a long time. And the crux of this is, if you really want something and you can provide it better for yourself, then release the expectation for someone else to provide it for you. To try and fit this idea of having the external reality of what you think that you want and you need. Because our desires, they start to blend into the paradigms of expectations, of social conditioning. And it can just very easily blend into each other, and you cannot notice that you've gone from a desire into an expectation that is not truly aligned with that desire. In the end, it's okay. It's okay where everyone is, where they're at, and accepting that can give you a lot of peace of mind. Because then you can release your expectation of what you expect and want them to be.